The morning of my wedding, I woke up before dawn, my heart racing, not with excitement, but with dread. Not because I didn't want to marry Michael, he was kind, steady, someone who made me feel safe, but because I had already felt the sting of their words. Weeks ago, my cousin Mariah had sneered at me during a family brunch. Your wedding? Oh, it's cute, I guess. Not special, though. Really, nothing like Auntie Gloria's or Stephanie's. At the time, I smiled and nodded politely. But the words dug deep, the kind that linger, like a shadow stretching across your soul. They made me doubt myself, my worth, even the sanctity of my own happiness. And now, as I sat in my bridal suite, the satin gown heavy on my shoulders, the words rang louder than ever. Not special, not important, just ordinary. I breathed in, trying to steady myself. God, if this is a test, I trust you to make it beautiful, I whispered. It started innocently enough. Flowers weren't delivered on time. The cake was wrong, vanilla, instead of the chocolate raspberry I'd painstakingly tasted and approved. My bridesmaids were late, stuck in traffic that wasn't supposed to exist. And when I looked in the mirror, trying to find the bride I had imagined for years, my reflection stared back with exhaustion and doubt. And yet, I forced myself to smile. Because this was my day, and I would not let anyone, family, strangers, or my own fears, steal it from me. I didn't notice the first signs of sabotage, subtle as a whisper. The florist, nervous and twitchy, accidentally knocked over a vase. My bouquet spilled onto the pristine floor. The photographer seemed confused, missing crucial shots. Michael tried to reassure me, but I could feel his tension. Something in the air was off. It wasn't until Aunt Gloria arrived that everything crystallized. She looked around, lips pursed, scanning the decorations with an almost imperceptible smirk. Well, she said, loud enough for everyone in the suite to hear, it's cute, I suppose. Not very grand, though. I've been to better. I just hope the guests don't find it disappointing. I froze. That tone, the clipped words, the hidden laugh, wasn't just judgment. It was a calculated strike, meant to wound. My family had a history of one-upmanship, of turning milestones into competitions. But this felt personal, almost malicious. I forced a smile. Thank you for coming, Aunt Gloria. I hope you enjoy it. Her lips twitched in a near smile. She was already plotting, I could feel it. And that's when I realized my wedding was not just a celebration. It had become a test, a trial to see if I would crumble under the weight of humiliation, betrayal, and sabotage. By noon, the ceremony was scheduled to begin. Guests were arriving, and the air buzzed with the excitement of strangers and family alike. Michael held my hand, his grip steady, grounding me. You're glowing, he whispered. Don't let them ruin this. I nodded, but inside I was seething. These were the same people who had mocked my accomplishments, dismissed my joy, whispered behind my back. They had made a habit of stealing the spotlight, undermining every victory, every celebration. And now they thought they could tarnish this sacred day too. I remembered my mother's words from years ago, her voice gentle but firm. People will try to dim your light, darling. Let them. Shine brighter anyway, and let God handle the rest. I swallowed hard, took a deep breath, and focused on Michael. I could not control their actions, but I could control mine. The ceremony began, and despite their attempts, there was magic in the air. The sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, catching the crystals on my gown and scattering colors across the floor. Michael's eyes were steady, loving. Guests whispered, enchanted by the intimacy and grace of the moment. And then it happened. A sharp, almost shrill laugh rang out from the back. I turned, and there was Mariah, leaning against a pew, her arms crossed, face twisted in a mixture of amusement and contempt. Did she really think she could pull this off? She whispered loudly to whoever was beside her. I felt my blood boil. Every muscle in my body tensed, and my mind raced. I could feel the heat rising, the embarrassment. But then a strange calm descended. I remembered Nola's courage, a child I had watched silently bear fear and silence for 5 years. And I realized I could do this differently. I would not scream, argue, or beg. I would rise above. And God, He had a plan. As the ceremony proceeded, more small sabotages emerged. The aisle runner was stained in several places. The flower girl dropped petals on the floor with reckless abandon, and someone, likely a conniving relative, had replaced the music with a poorly edited track that skipped and faltered. But here's the thing. The guests didn't notice. They only saw what I allowed them to see. I smiled, radiated warmth, and kept moving forward, step by step, word by word, smile by smile. Every insult, every small act of sabotage became invisible to the world. I transformed humiliation into strength, mockery into grace. By the time Michael and I exchanged vows, the room was silent, reverent. Every eye was on us, not on the mistakes, the mishaps, or the judgments, but on the love, the faith, the resilience we were embodying. And in that moment, I understood the test for what it truly was, a divine orchestration, a challenge to prove that love and faith outshine envy and malice. The reception began, and the atmosphere shifted. Guests mingled, laughter echoed, and the tension of earlier hours dissipated. But I knew the saboteurs were still present, lingering in corners, hoping to undermine. That's when God's intervention became undeniable. First, the caterers, who had been flustered all morning, suddenly found their rhythm. Platters arrived on time, dishes were perfect, desserts arrived without issue. The band, initially awkward and skipping cues, hit a flawless note, filling the hall with music that seemed to flow from heaven itself. Then the most unexpected thing happened. As I walked to the dance floor with Michael for our first dance, the guests parted, and the sunlight hit the room through the tall windows, glinting off crystal chandeliers. The room seemed to glow, as if lit from within. Aunt Gloria and Mariah froze mid-sip, mid-laugh. Their expressions shifted, from contempt to disbelief. The grandeur they had dismissed with words and smirks became real before their eyes. Undeniable. In that moment, I realized God had turned the sabotage into a stage for my testimony. Every attempt to humiliate had become a witness to His power. The emotional triggers hit hard now, not just for me, but for everyone in attendance. Betrayal. They had tried to humiliate me publicly, to rob me of joy, and I had felt it deeply. Humiliation. Every snide comment and smirk had cut like a knife. Observation. I saw their plots, their subtle manipulations, and refused to let them succeed. Strategic revenge. I didn't confront them openly. Instead, I let the universe, or God, deliver vindication. Faith. I held on to belief, whispered prayers, and allowed divine timing to play out. Vindication. Their own eyes witnessed the beauty they had tried to destroy. As the evening progressed, the small injustices became miraculous stories. The photographer captured every moment, the laughter, the tears, the stolen glances between Michael and me, the joy of friends and relatives. The images were flawless, as if reality itself had bent to showcase what the naysayers could not see. By the end of the night, the saboteurs were quietly defeated. Their whispers had no echo. Their contempt had no audience. My wedding, dismissed as not special, had become a testament to perseverance, grace, and faith. Later, as guests left, I stood with Michael, exhausted but elated. He wrapped his arms around me. "You did it," he said. "Not just survived, but thrived." I smiled, feeling the weight of the day settle into peace. "God did it," I whispered. I just followed Him. Weeks later, the story spread. Friends shared the photos and videos online, praising the beauty and intimacy of a wedding that had overcome sabotage, envy, and mockery. People reached out, sharing their own stories of betrayal and humiliation, and how my story inspired them to trust, to persevere, and to hold on to faith. Even Aunt Gloria and Mariah, confronted with the undeniable success and joy of the day, were forced to confront their own bitterness. They could not undo the testimony that had unfolded, and in their hearts, they recognized, though silently, that they had underestimated both God's hand and the strength of a woman determined to rise. Months later, I looked back on that day, and every hardship, every sting, every whispered insult had transformed into a jewel in the crown of my story. Not because of me, but because I had chosen to allow God to take what was meant for harm and turn it into beauty, into a witness, into a testimony. As I tucked Michael in one evening, he smiled and said, "You know, this wedding really was special. Not because of the flowers or the music or even the dress, but because you let faith and grace guide it. You made it extraordinary." I nodded, remembering the morning's terror, the doubts, the whispered words of dismissal. I had passed the test. God had taken the day meant to humiliate me and transformed it into a testimony of resilience, love, and divine timing. And as I looked at our home filled with love, laughter, and dreams, I whispered a prayer of gratitude. For the trials, for the sabotage, for the words meant to wound. They had only made the testimony sweeter. God didn't just make my wedding special. He made the ones who doubted me regret underestimating the power of faith and patience. Narrator. Revenge didn't rebuild my life. Faith did. But God's justice? It always finds its way home. End screen. Would you have forgiven him? Comment below.